Ladies and gentlemen, big week in British Columbia, and it wouldn't be complete without the BC Poly Hot Stove. Breaking it all down, I'm Jordan Bateman. I'm Vice President of Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association here in Burnaby. And overseas in the war-torn capital is...
It's Maclean K. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Orca. I'm here in the not locked down BC legislature. It's much calmer here today than it was earlier this week.
Maclean, I was following it avidly on Twitter and BC One. I had my popcorn popped here in my office in Metrotown. Tuesday was quite a day. I imagine it was more entertaining for me on Twitter than it was to actually be in the mess. So tell us about, you wrote a piece for the Orca on it. Tell us about your personal experience with protests here.
Well, I mean, I'll start right at the beginning. When I was walking to work on Tuesday, I walk basically across the front lawn to get in one of the side doors. The protest had been there since early last week. But as I was walking by, there was people organizing with megaphones, and they were dividing people into groups. And I could hear them assigning them entrances. And it became pretty clear really fast what they were intending to do, so I thought it was best to get in like right away. Yeah. And that turned out to be a good decision because I think not 3 minutes later they had arrived at each one of the many entrances to the legislature. It has many more entrances than you realize it does.
Yeah.
And from there, I mean, I was one of the first to arrive, so I was lucky in that respect. I mean, I got in before almost every MLA, cabinet minister, most of my colleagues here in the gallery. But the disadvantage was I couldn't leave. Building security were pretty clear, like, please don't go outside, please. And not because they were worried about my safety. It was they don't want to open the doors if they don't have to. So at one point I was texting I think actually I might have been texting with you. And you were saying, "Oh, you should go outside and see what it looks like from out there." And I was like, "Well, I can't. I'm actually not allowed."
I'm like, "Isn't there a window?" And then you were like, "Well, you're gonna tie bed sheets together from the third story. Like, no, don't hurt yourself. It's not that. It's not that big a
deal." No, it's a 3 stories straight down from where I was, so it wouldn't have been a great idea. And I'm not Richard Zussman, able to scale things in a single bound. Yeah. But from my vantage point, I was looking down on the main rear entrance in what's called the clerk's courtyard. It's the main, it is the back door, but it's the main door for most of the MLAs, simply because it's nearest the MLA parking lot and where I'd argue most of them have places in the James Bay area, so it's coming it's on their straight way in. Yeah. And we watched.
So just hang on, Maclean. So is that right behind? So you've got the building where Vaughn and Keith are. That the old was it stables or something, or armory or whatever.
The armory.
The armory, and then it's kind of back further behind the ledge. Is that?
Yeah. It's more towards the Government Street side than the Menzies Street side, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with the parking lot that's actually on the ledge grounds, it's a straight shot in from there.
Gotcha, okay.
At first, people were getting through being screamed at. I watched a couple MLAs sort of wend their way through. But after that, they stopped.
Shout out to Greg Kylo and the Shoe Swap Shimmy to get on in.
That's actually, I saw Greg Kylo and I think John Rustad. Yeah. And after that, security had to actually physically drag people in and through. And even then, after a certain point, they couldn't because the ranks were, I think, like 10 deep. You probably saw, if you're watching this, you probably saw the video of Agriculture Minister Lana Popham be denied entry. A woman who I guess is Chrissy Brett was blocking her entrance and didn't let her through. And they were, the one thing you don't necessarily see in that video is some of the things that are being screamed at her. I don't blame her for leaving and just not coming back, to be perfectly honest. It's no one should be having those things screamed in your face. And it's not just cabinet ministers. There's video of interns being screamed at. I mean, like, these are like 20-year-old kids.
I know. Well, there's a lot. In fact, I think we should approach this in a little bit differently. Let's kind of go person by person and talk about some of the figures in this thing and their experiences. And you mentioned Lana Popham, and to me that was a very compelling piece of video because, number one, Lana Popham, until she became a cabinet minister, was essentially a professional protester herself. She would have, in a different world, different universe where she's not an MLA and or she's still in opposition, she would have probably been out there linking arms with those people. I mean, I think that's fair to say. And she, professionally is walking up, she's got her bag, she's ready to go for the day, throne speech, big day, and she is stopped by a lady with some sort of magical, powerful feather that kind of kept going around, and they're screaming at Lana, and Popham just like turns around. It was like Grandpa Simpson in that meme where he walks in, sees Bart at the burlesque club and walks right back out and grabs his hat and goes off. I was amazed that to find out later, like, she never made another attempt to enter the building that day. She wasn't in for the throne speech.
She was not in for the throne speech. I don't know if she made another attempt to come in, but she certainly was one of those who were empty. We counted about 11 empty seats altogether for the throne speech. Those are the ones we could see. That does include Tracy Reddy's, who was away because she's ill. So I mean, that doesn't count, I guess you could say. But there, I mean, out of how many MLAs are there? I should know this. 80 something.
Well, did they have a majority? Did they have a majority in the House, the government side?
Yeah, the split was almost exactly even. I believe it was 6 BC Liberal and 5 NDP that weren't there.
Right.
And again, I guess you can't say they were all protest related, but I have to imagine of that 11, probably 10 were because of the protest.
Yeah, sure.
But it was sad. We watched a name we didn't mention, Ralph Sultan, who's 83. And this actually was really this was sad to watch because Ralph is 83 and he's becoming, he's fit, but he's 83. And I don't think he relished the thought of being dragged through a sea of angry protesters. And so he just stood there by himself as far away as he could on the sidewalk, just kind of wondering what the hell to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was a real physical risk to him. I mean, they were pushing and shoving.
Yeah.
If you're 83, that's an existential threat. I'm sorry, it is.
Yeah, it is.
And if you think I'm torquing this, I'm not. I mean, I was watching Ralph. He was really sad.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's not right. It was hard to watch.
Yeah. We talked about him. Let's talk about some of the other folks a little outside of the protest thing. I know Ellis Ross got yelled at for not doing enough for Indigenous rights. Ellis Ross. This shows you how foolish these protesters are when you're screaming at the former chief counselor of the Haisla Nation, which took the Haisla really from being have-nots to one of the wealthier First Nations in the province. It's certainly one with the best prospects right now as LNG Canada comes in.
Well, I watched that happen. And it was a young lady who, let's just say she was not Indigenous. I don't think she knew who Ellis Ross was.
Yeah.
It wasn't like she was calling him a sellout or anything. She just thought he was yet another politician. And so this young lady got in his face, and I mean, like, nose to nose, and was screaming at him about, you should be standing up for Indigenous rights. Ellis, his facial expression did not change. He just stood there staring at her for about 10 seconds and then moved on. It was. I mean, if the day wasn't filled with such memorable in a bad way moments, that would have been the one that stood out the most, I think.
Yeah, no, Ellis Ross of all the people. Let's talk about Janet Austin. So she's the lieutenant governor. It's her job to read out the speech prepared for her by the great government of British Columbia. But to do that, she has to actually get in the building. You can't have the phone speech. It's the throne speech. She has to be actually on, in the room on the throne. You actually, in your previous life, have written 5 or 6 of these throne speeches. I
have indeed.
It's not something you can just edit on the fly. It's something that takes weeks to prepare and then is really locked down the night before because the LG has to prepare and you have to have it printed and ceremonial copies, all that important stuff. She got in. And we assume, although we've never been told, she got in through the hush-hush secret tunnel, the Harper Tunnel somewhere.
We don't know, and it's probably best that we don't know, to be totally honest. This is true. I have quite a good relationship, because I did write a number of throne speeches. I have a good relationship with the Lieutenant Governor's staff, and I ran into one of her personal secretary, who I know quite well, and asked straight up, how'd you get in? And he just said, I can't tell you. And I was, I was embarrassed for asking. I was like, you are absolutely right. Yeah. It's better that I don't know. And it's best that we don't even talk about it, which actually, I know you have people you want to talk about, but bringing up Janet Austin.
Yes, let's talk about him.
Yeah, let's talk about unprintable. Victoria City Councillor Ben Isett.
The worst city councillor in Canada, by the way.
Well, apparently he's on radio right now here in Victoria, being grilled by Adam Sterling, which I will be happy to listen to the stream after we get off here.
Maclean, Adam Sterling, the best radio host in Canada? For my money, he might be.
Well, I'd be very curious to hear what Councillor Isett's justification for this was. I mean, there were 3 Victoria City councillors who came to the protest. Jeremy Loveday, Shamark Dubo, and Ben Isett. No problem with people coming to a protest. None whatsoever. No, especially if they just want to, come by and observe. That's fine too. Ben Isett was apparently, this was confirmed by a number of people, was trying to talk to staff to find out where the Lieutenant Governor would come in. And the context was absolutely clear that he wanted to make sure that she would, at the very least, have to pass through some very nasty and hostile protesters. This is the Queen's representative. This isn't done. And he was trying to, leverage his position as city councillor to do this. If not that Ben Isett watches the show or listens to it, but I'm sure he would object to me saying this. But look, it's been confirmed by 3 or 4 people that you were trying to do this.
Yeah.
It's
a garbage move. It's an unsafe move. It's not your business.
No.
And it just reaffirms to so many of us watching me outside, like, God bless you, Victoria. You're nuts for electing this guy. Like he is not. He's not a leader, or he's not the kind of leader that you should be putting in power. I mean, like, what's his goal there? Oh, she's over there, so rough her up. Like what's the point? Like, jostle her as she's going in. She's the Queen's representative in this province, right? Like,
there were a number of people at the protest, and this is worth saying, actually. Are you familiar with the Altamont story, the Rolling Stones concert, the tragedy in 1960, whatever? I want to say 68. They basically, what happened was the Rolling Stones hired the Hells Angels to be security, and bad things happened. Someone died. Yeah. I think the protest was a little like that. No one died, but the people who organized the protest quite actively and said so in interviews, recruited amongst, the anarchist community and people like that. And then were quite shocked when they had to ask people. I watched a couple of the organizers go around with megaphones saying, please stop spitting on people. Please stop shoving people. You're going too far. But when you recruit the Hells Angels to do security, these things happen. Yeah. And when you have been winking and indeed actively courting and recruiting anarchists who are saying, shut down Canada, you should have taken them at their word. And, Ben Isett was saying, yes, we need to shut down Canada. This is a city councillor. I get a little speechless when I talk about people like Ben Isett. I just don't get it. And to his credit, John Horgan was also a little speechless when it came to Ben Isett. My thoughts on that individual are unprintable. That is a direct quote.
Yes, that looked good on the re-election platform. I didn't know the Rolling Stones Hells Angels story, but I did watch a documentary on Woodstock this year, and what Woodstock did is they hired essentially a hippie commune to do security.
That's right.
And it just mellowed everyone out, mainly because they would give them marijuana if you were too out of control. Just kind of mellow you out. So I'm going to have to go back in my rock history and learn a little bit about the Stones and the
Altamont, I believe, is the concert. I want to say 1968. I mean, it's a sad story because someone died.
Terrible. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. Let's. You mentioned John Horgan was speechless, a little bit speechless. He was certainly speechless the first day when John, the great communicator, Horgan, more press conferences than the last premier, and not a bubble boy like Christy Clark was, and willing to stand in there and ask questions. Well, he tucked tail and ran on the throne speech day.
He was shocked. And lest anyone accuse me of editorializing, I want to use the Premier's own words, in which he said he was despondent, and which he said protesting was in his DNA. And he told us about going to his first protest at the age of 11 and many protests since. And he considers it fundamental to part of his own personal growing up as well as his professional history. Lots and lots of protests on the lawn, and he even joked about going to protests with what he called reversible signs, because this is again Premier's words. Because the protesters don't always know what they're protesting. Again, Premier's words. Lest you think I'm editorializing. So for him, he said he described sitting in his office watching a protest that, to your point, he knew that his people would have been part of had the election gone differently a couple of years ago, and hearing them shout, shut down Canada, and Canada's a fascist state, and all these things, and it shocked him. I actually think that him canceling his press conference was probably a good idea if his emotional state was as he described.
I wanted to hear it in the moment.
Yeah, I did too. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. I'm speaking in terms of, his staff and him. Yeah. That was probably the right call because we were looking at him on the throne speech day. We watched him walk away from media. I mean, he was not himself. Yeah. He was not being aloof. He was traumatized.
Yeah.
And again, yes, he should have spoken to us. He is the premier of the province. I agree with you there. But I saw him. He was profoundly affected.
Yeah. Here's an interesting bookend, right? So the last legislative session ends in the fall on really the UNDRIP note. And John Horgan, proud as a peacock, he's brought in UNDRIP that no one else has, ever done in Canada, and we're the first province to have it. And what does it really mean? Well, we don't really know. We'll deal with all that later. But, Stuart Phillips is like wrapping his arms around the guy. Like, this is the moment, right? Fast forward, like if you told that guy, those people standing there then, oh, by the way, for 4 months from now, it's going to be, you're going to be able to get back in this building because, because of a small, contingent of 5 out of 20 hereditary chiefs in a far-flung First Nation that actually supports the project 80%, are going to stir up some controversy. None of them would have believed it. No, of course not. No, it's just the start of a new relationship. That borrow a term from another former premier. Amazing the. Almost the fearful symmetry of that whole thing, right? The ends on UNDRIP and then starts with a protest. Shows you there's a long, long way to go when we talk about reconciliation.
Well, you're right, and you bring that up, and the premier brought that up as well, saying that he was kind of, I'm going to use the word hurt, that none of those First Nations leaders said anything to. There was no words of support. No, hey,
put the boots on,
this government's doing what they could. Yeah. He really thought that there'd be someone like a Cheryl Casimir or a Stuart Phillip, which is kind of naive, saying, hey, we can disagree on this, but they're trying and they're doing a lot of other good stuff, and that plainly didn't happen. And I think it was, quite frankly, a little naive to think it would, to be perfectly honest. Especially, when you treat Stuart Phillip like he is the king of all First Nations in British Columbia for long enough, he's going to act like it.
Yes. Yeah, you're exactly right. Before we go off, Horgan, let's talk about, you mentioned that he's been in many protests. It really is in the DNA of the NDP.
Oh yeah,
and there is a sense of chickens coming home to roost. You reap what you sow. All those great cliches that are cliche because they're true. I thought the Liberals had actually a very good video showing NDPers at protests throughout the years. Like, here's Scott Fraser protesting, and here's John Horgan's with his "Sight See Sucks" sign, which, by the way, we love at ICBA since we managed to change his mind on it. All sorts of these Well, Dave Eby, and talk about another politician. Dave Eby wrote a book on protesting the 2010 Olympics. Hilarious again. He writes a book. This is how you protest the 2010 Olympics. The protesters now, 10 years later, use that book. The day after John Horgan is at an event celebrating the start of the Olympics 10 years ago. Olympics that he opposed, by the way. Anyways, no wonder political reporters love British Columbia. We're the craziest place on earth.
You're right. And I saw that video. I thought it was actually pretty well done because they didn't hit you over the head with a sledgehammer. It was literally just, here's images of NDP cabinet ministers at protests. And there was many they didn't include. There was an infamous one that I think has been wiped from YouTube of Michelle Mungal leading a really weird call-out dance at Occupy Nelson, which was a thing. We didn't even mention the Occupy protest.
Whoa, let's not yada yada. Occupy Nelson?
Oh yeah, that was. I wish I could find it. It was her, getting a bunch of people who lived in Nelson to chant along with her, singing, to the left, not to the left, to the right. I'm never going to be able to do it justice. It ended with her saying, "And they can kiss the back of my butt." Literally, that's a quote.
Oh my God.
And I only know this because this is something that you see once and you never, ever, ever forget. But yeah, this is like the Occupy movement. We didn't even talk about that. But yeah, it is a fair point to bring up that yes, they have at the very least, if not participated in, winked at and indulged the protest movement. And again, there's nothing wrong with peaceful protests. Mm-hmm. But when you are indulging those who say, shut down Canada, smash capitalism, the people who are literally saying that Canadian law is illegitimate and should not apply.
Yeah.
It's not a good bed to make.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. All right, a few more things. By the way, when you're talking about Occupy, don't forget, the BCTF were big marchers in that big Occupy Vancouver protest. And I do wonder, the worst things get between the TF and the NDP if the TF suddenly quietly nudges some of its teachers to let its students go to some of these protests to add some volume to it. So.
Oh, I mean, there's protests at government buildings across the street. I came by 2 of them on the way in today, and it's a very young crowd.
Yeah.
It's a very young crowd. Yeah. I will say that they do not appear to be actually blocking entrances.
Okay.
And so, this is a good thing. Mm-hmm. But yes, it's to your point. It's a very young crowd.
They read EB's book. They know what to do. Okay, let's talk about a few more characters. Richard Zussman. God bless him. I love that guy. So Zussman, this is a big day for Zussman. Speech Throne Day is also the election of officers to the press gallery executive. Richard Zussman, the defending president, up for re-election. I understand he had bagels to bribe the electorate. And gets there and cannot enter the building. And, tries a couple times. Cameras are following him pretty hilariously. And finally ends up kind of getting a boost from someone scaling the side of a wall like Spider-Man. And Lisa Yuzda, who's another press gallery reporter, and Richard's wife, hilarious. Her tweets were hysterical. Like she couldn't stop watching it. Someone gifted it for her. Richard like scrambling up the wall and over in his khakis. Like it's hilarious. But that's going to be one of the lasting images as well, right? Like not just stopping politicians, but stopping staff, and we'll come to talk about staff in a second, stopping interns, stopping reporters whose job it is to cover the protests that you're trying to amplify your cause with.
Stopping cleaning staff. Stopping, if you consider the optics of overwhelmingly white protesters screaming at, let's just say, not overwhelmingly white elderly cleaning staff, which happened. I'm not making that up. This happened.
Well, Maclean, they're colonial cleaning staff. They should know better.
I know the cleaning staff here at the building. You will never meet nicer people in your life, and it upsets me to think that they were, screamed at and called racists.
Yeah,
the immigrants from the Philippines. It's just I would rather not say more.
Yes. All right, so Zussman, did he win? By the way, did he win? Or did anyone run against him?
Yes. Yeah. Well, first let me say the bagels were delicious.
Okay, great.
And yes, Viva El Presidente. I voted for him.
Well, exactly. So the bagels worked. Speaking of other reporters out there, Bob Kronbauer, it's not Daily Hive. What's his? Vancouver's Awesome.
Vancouver's Awesome.
He was out there doing other stuff, and then he started filming this. And the hilarious thing is the crowd kind of turned on him because they thought he was a narc. They thought he was a cop. Yeah. And Bob's having this Twitter introspection now about, like, what is it about me that protesters would think I'm a police officer and not a cool guy like them?
Yeah, there was a number of incidents like that. We have a new reporter here in the press gallery. His name is Sean Craig. Yeah. He works for the Capitol. Sean's a great guy. Yeah. And this is something I witnessed. I watched from the window, so this is a first-hand account. Sean was doing a great job taking video of the various things, doing all the things that Ben Isaac claimed he was doing,
right.
Recording the various interactions and going around. And Sean was talking to one of the organizers. Again, I was watching this happen. Mm-hmm. And then Sean went away and ran around the corner. And then the organizer comes with his and does this to the crowd on the back steps and says, okay, I need your guys' attention for a second. And basically just said, I was just talking to this reporter who calls himself a reporter. He's not a reporter. He's an alt-right troll from one of the a site like The Rebel. He's not a real reporter, so absolutely don't talk to him. And if he starts talking to you, just like basically raise your hand, call for an adult, and they didn't say call for an adult. Raise your hand, call for one of the organizers, and we'll deal with it. And like, if you know Sean, he might have been the most sympathetic to the protesters in general, not the violence, obviously, but it was astonishing. It was
Shannon Waters and Andrew McLeod. Shannon Waters and Andrew McLeod are more sympathetic. But here's the problem: the Capitol. It sounds like a powerful colonial thing, whereas the Orca sounds woke and lit and all those hip things. So,
well, it's not a vegetarian animal. I guess there's that. I should have named it after something herbivorous.
That's right. All right, let's talk about a few other things. Oh, back to Isaac. He gets in a fight on Twitter with Victoria Police, which, by the way, he has a vote that controls the budget of. And Victoria Police say, hey, we've heard some reports that at the ledge there might have been some incidents of violence. If that's you, if you're a victim of that, please come forward so we can get a statement and go from there. And apparently there was bloody noses and some folks who were hurt, and they should be encouraged to come forward. Unless you're Ben Essett. When you say, no, that's all fake news, literally, hashtag fake news, and shut your mouth, Victoria Police, don't do your jobs. I was there, I saw everything was cool, which, by the way, it's physically impossible to see every entrance of the legislature. In fact, it's physically impossible to see more than 2 at any given time.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't witness any of the assaults, but I know of 3 of them, and I have discussed them with 2 of the victims who do not want to be named, and I'm not going to do it. Yeah. I will say they're women. Okay. And so I guess 4 victims have come forward to the police, and the police have confirmed this. So at the very least, we have 4 actual, real allegations of assault. For the counselor to suggest that it's illegitimate or fake news for Victoria City Police to ask witnesses and victims to come forward, and that's all. Yeah. Is, spreading some kind of political narrative frankly, it's disgusting. Mm-hmm. And then he got into it with as you say, the chief of police on Twitter, where he's saying the Victoria Police has been getting beyond its mandate and all that. We mentioned Adam Sterling earlier. He dug up a clip of the last time the Victoria Police was asking for its budget. It wasn't Ben Essett, it was Jeremy Loveday explicitly saying, if we give you your budget you're asking for, will you stop criticizing us in the media? Ah! And Jeremy Loveday was one of the counselors at the protest. But It's the relationship between the Victoria City Council and Victoria Police is becoming more and more toxic. The Victoria Mayor, by the way, we didn't mention her, Lisa Helps, was, bending over backwards trying to say, these do not reflect the stated position of the City Council or the City of Victoria. But, 3 city councillors.
Yeah. Okay, well, it's frankly the Speaker, Darryl Plekis' job to ensure a safe workplace, a safe work environment, which he's had middling results on. But did I miss Plekis' Alan Mullen press conference? You know I love my Alan Mullen press conferences.
There was no Darryl Plekis Alan Mullen press conference. There is an injunction which was obtained late last night. I say late last night, yesterday afternoon, against blockading entrances to the. I'm oversimplifying, but basically against blockading entrances to the legislature. They are posted at every entrance of the legislature now. It's I think 4 or 5, 6 pages, and so there's this big wall of paper on every door. I tweeted
Luther
it
and the 95
this morning.
Theses nailed on the wall.
Yeah, kind of. There is. He has not spoken publicly, to my knowledge, has the Speaker, but he did obtain the injunction. It does not apply to government buildings across the street, which it can't do, obviously, because he has no jurisdiction there. But the injunction does apply on the grounds of the legislature itself.
Does it feel weird that we need injunctions to enforce what actually should just be the law?
Yeah, it does, because there has been there's been a lot of debate out there about what constitutes protest. Yeah. And there's debate on whether or not these are pickets or protests. They're not pickets. They're not on strike.
No, they're pickets. Yeah. Stephanie Smith, BCGEU president, said she would not cross their picket line.
Yeah. But to me, it's not a picket line unless you're on strike.
But she's BCGEU president. Are you telling me she doesn't know what a picket line is? Come on.
Fair enough. But is protest designed to, shut down commuter rail? Is the protest designed to, it's never designed to assault anyone, but is it designed to prevent people from getting into their place of work, or is it just to make you aware? Yeah. There are protests going on, as we said, across the street right now. Yeah.
There are protests, they do not appear to be rail line right now that have shut down commuter rail here in the Lower Mainland.
Yeah, I'm contrasting. Shutting down rail is, to me, that's not protest. That's civil disobedience. That's mischief.
That's illegal.
What they're doing outside the government building right now, which is just standing there with signs and apparently letting people in if they want to go in, that's protest. Yes, sure. They're on the sidewalks. They're not blocking traffic.
Yeah. You know what we need? You know what we need? The NDP to bring in bubble zones. Sorry, so shout out to my old SoCon friends out there. Well, I want to talk about the incident on the island. I think it was the Island Highway where they closed it down. And there's video out there of 4 or 5 people getting out of their cars after waiting in traffic for quite a long time, these protesters. And they very quietly and calmly, unbelievably calmly, considering how outraged I would be, they went and they basically picked up the stack of tires, threw it in the ditch. They picked up the wood, plywood that the protesters threw it in the ditch. And the police come over and they're like, you can't do this. And the guy very calmly says, no, you can't do it. for some reason. I get it. You can't do it. You're a cop, police officer, and you have to respect everyone's. But I can certainly do this. I can certainly, they can put stuff on the highway. I can certainly pull it off. And they end up arresting the guy who is clearing the space. After a hilarious interlude where one woman starts screaming at him about how he's throwing her sacred objects into the ditch, and you go back and look at the tape, and it was like 4 rubber tires, like old tires, and like plywood. So I'm not sure how sacred those are, but whatever. Anyways, a white woman, by the way, screaming about her sacred objects in the ditch. He gets arrested, and like the thing that bothered me about this arrest is that number one, he's clearing this off. Number two, he was incredibly respectful to the police. Like none of the interactions we saw in video were he didn't even lose his temper. Like he was very respectful. He didn't harm anyone. He was just clearing off this stuff that was on, the main thoroughfare. So I did tweet out like I think I stand with the road clearers here. This doesn't make a lot of sense. Like what has to happen in order for the police to move in and actually clear this stuff out. They got like 600 likes. It went crazy. But, this is going to happen more and more. Angus Reid had a poll out yesterday that claimed something like 45% of British Columbians support these protests. I don't think that poll was taken after the legislature incident. I think it was probably taken before, because it's like, how did you have it that quick?
And I don't certainly before the West Coast Express was shut down.
Yeah, and I don't believe it for 1 second. I think that's. I think you've got a very skewed crowd online that may have been padding results. No offense, Angus Reid, you're a great company, I'm sure, but you probably think you have fail safes on this. But there's no way 45% of people support this, because you chat with people, like it's the topic of conversation everywhere. You think shutting down Commercial and Broadway for a whole night? You think that's popular? You think shutting down the Lionsgate Bridge was popular, or shutting down the Kids Community Center? Come on, I'll be interested to hear what Jody says tomorrow on BC Poly Hot Stove, because she's much more kind and gentle than I am. But I consider her more indicative of normal humans than I am. But I found that Angus Reid poll crazy. Do you want to wrap up with talking about how our Prime Minister, though, is showing great leadership in this time and guiding the country through? By the way, there's shutdowns also back east over this. And our Prime Minister is checking nose. In Africa, trying to get us a seat on the Security Council for some crazy reason, while here at home, everything's going to hell in a handbasket.
Well, here's the thing. The Prime Minister yesterday was in Senegal. Where he is, they're being very upfront about the fact that he's trying to drum up support for votes for Canada to sit on the UN Security Council, which is a matter of great import to the Prime Minister and probably not to many other people. But here's the thing. He was at a press conference with the president of Senegal, whose name escapes me, who was very upfront about a number of things that don't fly in Senegal, one of which was pride parades. Another was homosexuality at all. In fact, that was the headline in whatever the newspaper is in Senegal. Our society does not accept homosexuality. The Prime Minister stood there and said nothing. To me, that was an opportunity to at least say, in Canada, we feel differently.
Yeah.
Maybe just that. You can imagine the shitstorm of reaction had that been, Stephen Harper having done that exact same thing. And the reason I bring that up is this, that is where the Prime Minister was. If what we saw on Tuesday in legislature is going to be confirmed as acceptable and normal and the way protests should be done, and it's not about self-sacrifice, it's not about raising awareness, it's actually about disruption. It's actually about, preventing people from going about their lives, which to me is new. Then you'd better be prepared for groups like March for Life.
Yeah.
You'd better be prepared for groups like the Yellow Vests. I'm not going to mention the Sons of Odin and groups like that, because I don't think they're big enough. But March for Life is bigger than most people want to admit in this country. Yeah. The Yellow Vests is a growing movement, and so if shutting down, barricading, blocking people from going about their jobs, from getting to and from home and work, indeed assaulting women is the new normal, then it's going to be the new normal for everyone. And I think that there's a sort of a symmetry there. When the Prime Minister was in Senegal and failed to at least say, in Canada, we have a very different view on that, and is also failing to say there's too many people in Canada who should know better, saying, I actually sympathize with what they're doing, with the reason they're doing it, rather, but not what they're doing.
Yeah.
There's way too many people who have not said that. And that, to me, is, at the risk of sounding alarmist, it's a little frightening.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. That's not great. But at least he wasn't wearing their costumes.
That's true. He was not. He was dressed impeccably.
Yeah. Yeah. No. This has been I think it's been a discouraging week for a lot of folks that I know that we talk to, because a lot of the work that was done to bring the wet sweating in now just seems to be ignored. And the fact that 80% of the wet sweating people voted for this project, the fact that the elected council supports the project, the fact that there are real live wet sweating people working on the project today, earning a paycheck, making life better for their families, is ignored. The fact that 15 out of 20 of these hereditary chiefs support the project is ignored. The fact that, of the 5 that don't support the project, at least 2 came into their hereditary chiefness through very non-traditional means, ousting women who supported the project. The fact that you see a man like Alice Ross, who's given so much to British Columbia and, is one of the, even the NDP would say, one of the voices that deserves to be listened to on these issues, because he's walked the walk and talked the talk for a long time and has demonstrated results. The fact that he was disrespected on the steps of the People's Building, the People's House, as Vaughn Palmer and Keith Baldry like to call it. The fact that there are women with bloody noses because they were showing up for work, and that, recent immigrants were screamed at because they cleaned the legislature. It's a discouraging week for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, it is. And
I'm desolate, I'm despondent, like John Horgan all of a sudden.
It was hard not to be. Yeah. It was, I love this place. I've been around the legislature in some form or another since 2010.
Yeah.
And I have a huge amount of respect for it as an institution, regardless of who's in power. And I have a huge amount of respect for the system, which can be improved, yes, but I still believe that this is about as good as it gets. And to see it, assaults take place or hear about them, and hearing people chant that Canada is fundamentally illegitimate and that the whole country should be shut down is it was. I mean, I kind of saw why the premier was so shaken. I mean, it was hard not to be really depressed by it.
Yeah, absolutely. They had a throne speech. There really was nothing in it.
It was I mean, it was always going to be overshadowed. But yeah, there wasn't tons in it. There was a few sort of nuggets. The excuse me, the NDP have kind of adopted what Christy Clark's government did, in which they don't really spell out big announcements in the throne speech anymore.
No.
The logic being why? We may as well get the big hit from whatever awesome thing we're going to do when we announce it ourselves, rather than the lieutenant governor in a sea of other announcements.
Yes.
Which is how previous governments did it, and there's been a departure since then. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah. And God bless the lieutenant governors in this province, but they're not exactly the most oratorically gifted, delivering someone else's speech.
Well, and I mean, people don't know this, but I mean, they quibble over, I shouldn't say quibble, they object to what they will, overly political language in the throne speech.
Right.
You can't go in there and say, we're doing this because the BC Liberals are terrible and didn't, or vice versa. Right. The lieutenant governor, no. So you may as well say it yourself how you want to say it when you announce it yourself.
Yeah, no, that's a good way. That's a good point. All right, you and I, we will be broadcasting next live after the budget lockout lifts, probably around 1:45-ish on Tuesday, February 18th, assuming we can get into budget lockup and that.
Well, it's not a government building. It's at the conference center, so it's. I probably shouldn't have said that, but there's no reason to think we won't be allowed to get in. I hope.
Yeah, I hope so too. I'll be in the stakeholder lockup for ICBA. You, of course, will be in the cooler press area. This will be something. Razor thin surplus seems to be the buzzword out there, and don't expect too many bobbles, judging by what we're hearing.
No, I think one of the biggest things will be interesting to see is obviously we haven't even talked about the ICBC announcement, which they claim will mean substantial savings and all that kind of thing, and we haven't seen the numbers yet, which is fine. But are they going to book these projected savings into this budget? Is a very interesting question to me.
Yeah, no, they have to. They have to.
Yeah, they might have to. That's probably why they did it.
Exactly. Otherwise, they would have waited till after. Yeah, no, they'll be in there. I'm also intrigued. This is like really inside baseball. They're taking the 3-year transportation plan, stretching out to 5, which is code for we're punting Massey another 2 years. So I'll be interested to see. And now you can say, well, let's look in there. Is the SkyTrain line in there? Is this in there? Is that in there? Is Massey in there? And if they're all in year 5, you know exactly how important they are. Not very important to this government. So we'll take a look at that. We will see you all on, Tuesday, 1:30, 1:45, facebook.com/theorcabc if you want to watch us live. If McLean's bringing the mic, right? You've got a mic. You're all set?
I will be all set. We'll be ready to go.
Exciting stuff. Thanks for watching. You can follow him at Maclean K for his protest updates, and I'm at Jordan Bateman for the snarky comments from across the water.
See you next week.
All right, bye.